Most unlikely of villains, stones of blame and forepaws. Does it talk? Does it know how? Does it bottle? Does it meow? In the lair of the cerebral, heaven showing so much more. When you go brains at the door.
Welcome back to Rebroadcast. I'm your host Jason from the Nerds RPG Variety Cast. Today is another in a series of re-releases where Rob from Down the Heap podcast discusses the Universal monster movies with me. And this first appeared on the Down in the Heap podcast. This is a re-release. We've removed some audio clips due to YouTube rights issues, but otherwise this is as it was released over on his show. There are links in the show notes. Go check Rob's show out. It's a great show. He keeps producing excellent content to this day. I hope you enjoy it. Today we're going to talk about The Bride of Frankenstein. And then next week we'll be back with another bonus episode.
Avast me hearties, heave to and prepare to be boarded. In old school games, life is cheap. Don't be a blasted dope. Bring your pole, your oil, and your rope. And try not to go down in a heap to Davy Jones' locker.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Down in Heap podcast. I'm your host, Rob, podcasting to you live from beautiful Northeast Minneapolis. And as promised, we have the triumphant return of Jason from Nerds RPG Variety Cast as we discuss The Bride of Frankenstein. Welcome to the show, Jason. Thanks for coming.
Hey, thank you for having me back. I'm really excited to discuss this movie.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of a little bit of a change up after the first movie. Do you feel like the tone is noticeably different, or just kind of a subtle change from the original Frankenstein?
Yeah, it's noticeably different, and it's not just noticeably different from this movie, but from the rest of the series. Now, after this movie, the series kind of starts to devolve into B movies and campy tropes, even more so. But
yep.
And this has campy tropes in it, but it's got. We'll get into it when we talk about people's interpretations of the film and things like that. And what reading into what Whale was trying to do here. Whale, James Whale, he was definitely trying to put campy tropes in the movie. And we see that with Dr. Pretorius, and we see that with adding in, some characters strictly for humor.
Yep.
Like your favorite character, your favorite actress in this movie, Una O'Connor.
Yes. She of the very shrill voice.
Yeah. But so there's definitely comedic elements in here where I don't think the original Frankenstein really had the intentional comedy like this. It had maybe some subversive comedy in there, but it wasn't in your face like this, where this is just straight, pitching towards the, lowest common denominator comedy. And we have that through the rest of the series, but the rest of the series doesn't ever get to this level. The rest of the series, it doesn't hit these highs, but it doesn't go for this. It doesn't. It's definitely way different in tone. And Whale didn't want to do this movie. And when they finally when they finally talked him back, cajoled him back into doing it, he said he wanted to make a wild movie because he felt he'd already exhausted material. And I think his quote was, the movie is going to be a hoot.
Right.
So, yeah.
And he had done in the interim between Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. So he did The Invisible Man, right? And
which made which was a great movie.
Right, absolutely. And that introduced a little bit of some of the comedic elements to it, or more maybe absurd things than, not that Frankenstein didn't have subtle things like that, but if you look at it almost as a continuum from Frankenstein, Invisible Man to Bride of Frankenstein, I think Invisible Man maybe is a little bit of a bridge between the two of them. I don't know. Am I going up in a wrong direction there, you think?
Yes and no. I would say so. We've seen Whale do this before. So an earlier movie Whale did is This Old House, and I don't know if you've seen that or when the last time you've seen or this. I'm sorry, The Old Dark House. I got
the Old Dark House, right?
Which was after Frankenstein.
Not Norm Abrams and Bob Vila.
Right. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. But yeah. So the Old Dark House is a 1932 movie, so it actually came out after Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And
I forgot about that one.
Yeah, and it has a lot of intentional comedy, like kind of like this one does. And in fact, he pulled actors from that movie, right? So the gentleman played Dr. Pretorius, Ernest
Thesiger. Yeah,
Thesiger. He's in that movie. Karloff is in that movie. The bride, the young lady that played the bride, Elsie Lancaster's not in that movie, but her husband is in that movie.
Charles Lawton.
Right. So I think you can see. I think maybe it's a director line from Frankenstein to The Old Dark House to Bride of Frankenstein.
I think you're right. Right. So this was picked up in 1935, Bride of Frankenstein. So we're nearly 4 years out from the original. And like you say, he's brought some of the people that he worked with on The Old Dark House. He's brought in a few people from The Invisible Man. And then there's a number of people returning from the original Frankenstein. You obviously still have Karloff.
Right.
And you have Colin Clive returning as Henry Frankenstein. You don't have Mae Clark returning as Elizabeth. And of course, Fritz died. But as we alluded to, Dwight Fry has come back and is again kind of an assistant, this time more of the assistant of Dr. Pretorius rather than Frankenstein. But he's, again, this kind of unsavory, well, not kind of, a very, very unsavory character.
Right. He plays Carl in this one.
Yes, Carl.
So we do have, like you say, we have some replacements. Colin Clive was potentially a replacement because his drinking had gotten really bad by this point. But Whale thought that his kind of skittish and that even though he was kind of a drunk at this point, he thought that the negative qualities that brought forth in Clive would make him better for this part. He thought he would be able to show this unhinged character of Henry Frankenstein better. So he kept him, which is kind of interesting. But I won't make that illusion on your show because your show is a family show. But there are other directors that have intentionally used traits from actors, cast them for negative traits, right?
Right. Sure.
So now some of the replacements. So we have Valerie Hobson now as Elizabeth Frankenstein. Yep. Now, the other thing I've really remember her from is Werewolf of London. The horror movie. Henry Hull was the werewolf. We also replace the Burgermeister, which I think I kind of like the original Burgermeister a little bit better. And we replace little Maria's family, which you never see her mother in Frankenstein, but I think the actor doing the father here is a big step down. But what we do bring in is we get Una O'Connor, who I know is a step down for you, but we get O.P. Hagee as the Hermit or Heggie. I'm not sure how you pronounce that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's Heggie or Heggie either, but he in a role that could potentially have been really fumbled. That whole scene could easily been complete nostalgic maudlin drivel, laughable kind of sentiment. They actually pull it off where it is pretty heartfelt and moving rather than just coming across as ridiculous,
Well, it's almost the heart of the movie, right? It's almost so if any of our viewers haven't seen Bride of Frankenstein, we are going to spoil it.
Right.
If you have, if
It's
you
only
have,
85 years old.
it's only 85 years old. If you have Hulu or one of these streaming services, you can get to the streaming services. Peacock is one of the channels out there. You can get a free subscription to Peacock, not pay anything. And Bride of Frankenstein and a number of other Universal monster movies are on there. You can watch without paying anything. So yeah, you do have to sign up, make an account with your email, but that's it. So the Peacock Network, you can watch this movie for free. Just to throw that out there somewhere you can find this movie, because I know Joe Richter complained if he had to pay to see Frankenstein, he wasn't going to see it, which is definitely his loss. But I couldn't find anywhere Frankenstein was playing for free, but this movie is playing for free.
I wonder, could you just do like a search in YouTube? I mean,
I didn't find a complete copy of it.
Okay.
Just clips. Yeah, I did look.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyhow, I just want to set that expectation that we will.
Yeah.
Because we'll probably bounce around talking about the plot and whatnot.
Yeah. So this opens up. Well, do you want to talk any more about like the before the interim between the two films, or how Whale or anyone else came to this point, or do you want to just go right into the movie?
No, I think we could just go into the movie because because Whale fought for this beginning.
Yep.
And this beginning wasn't popular with the higher ups at the studio, but I think it was really genius because a lot of this movie is duality. There are different themes in this movie, and a lot of people. Maybe this time initially we should talk about the themes and people reading into this movie and what's really there. And I don't want to go too deep into this because I'm not somebody with any authority to speak about feminism or looking at gay themes in movies, things like that.
Right.
But there's definitely the theme of the other and how the other relates to society. And that's definitely in this movie. Whether the other themes are in this movie, I guess you can go read papers on that. Most of Whale's close friends, his partner for many, many years, things like that, say that Whale put like the idea of the other in there, and he put campy ideas in there, but he wasn't trying to make a gay statement. Now, again, that's their words. That's like Curtis Harrington and James Curtis and David Lewis, those guys that knew Whale really well. That's what they say. But so I don't really, personally, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but the idea of the other and the idea of duality, I think we definitely see in this movie. And that opens up with these beautiful people, because we go to the real world setting of Lord Byron and Shelley and Mary Shelley and is Percy Shelley talking. And so these beautiful people talking about these horrible things, right? And so we start right away with the duality, and then the themes of good and bad and duality go throughout the movie. And arguably Mary Shelley's the outsider in this initial thing, because you have this lady who's writing this horror story.
Right. So that it's kind of an untraditional kind of thing, and they even make I think the actor that's playing Lord Byron says something like, "How could such a monstrous creation come from such a beautiful brow," or some some modest brow, or something like that. Makes this allude, and Elsie Lanchester, who's playing Mary Shelley in this, kind of coquettishly blinks at him, but also giving kind of a knowing smile and stuff. And you definitely have this kind of this warm parlor scene where they're recounting they don't really mention that it was kind of a writing contest, but they're just talking about her creation of Frankenstein. And then it goes to like flashback scenes from the original movie. But you even see Una O'Connor like coming through with dogs and stuff too. Like she's just part of the scenery as a servant, and of course she'll show up as a character in the movie, and Elsie, spoiler, will come through later on too in a different role. So it's you see the duality there as well. in a sort of theatrical way, not necessarily a thematic way. But
Right.
Sorry, I'm feeding my inner Dr. Pretorius. My only weakness is port.
Right. And that's definitely something we'll bring up when we talk about Dr. Pretorius.
Right.
My favorite character in the whole movie, definitely by far, is Dr. Pretorius. But
he's a great character.
Although Karloff still really just knocks out of the park as the monster.
Yep, definitely.
It's interesting, and I don't know how much we want to hop around, but
let's hop around. We don't need to follow any kind of
because people need to go see this.
That.
Yeah, people, you need to go see this movie. Even in modern movies, this stands up.
Yeah.
So Karloff does such a great job, and it's funny because he did not want it. So the monster talks in this movie. Yeah. In fact, it was billed that way, and on posters and things, the monster talks.
Yeah,
but Karloff didn't want it to.
And the monster demands a mate. Those were kind of like the two headlines on movie posters and stuff.
Right. And Karloff was adamantly against
the monster wants a mate. Yeah, Karloff thought it was stupid to have the monster talk. And I don't know. I mean, part of me thinks that Karloff is right, but this movie works so well, that it's hard to argue with the results. It would have been really interesting to see what kind of movie it would have been made had the monster still been mute, but maybe understanding, being able to understand what other people are saying, but not being able to communicate. It almost having him able to communicate verbally almost decreases the status of the other for the monster. I mean, he's definitely still an outsider, but being able to actually communicate makes it so at least he can commiserate with Dr. Pretorius and of course the Hermit. So
right. Yeah, I think it's a better movie that he does talk, and I mean, let's be honest, he's an outsider for a number of reasons,
right?
But in this movie, they especially play up he's an outsider because of his looks, but more than anything, right? And because that's why we see people scared of him, but I think, and it's interesting because they made the decision that he wasn't going to use any more than like a 10-year-old, the vocabulary what a 10-year-old would have, something like that, and just use a few words and have a small vocabulary, and I think it works, and I think it really pulls off some of these scenes, and you get some really effective scenes. We talk about duality and switches. So in the first movie, of course, Henry Frankenstein was telling everybody to sit down, right? And,
right.
And in this movie, the monster tells Henry to sit down.
Yep. Henry's now the pupil. He's going to be told what's going on. The monster's calling the shots now.
Right.
So
yeah, in the first movie, you go back the duality themes, right? The first movie, he drowns little Mary. In this movie, he saves the female shepherd. Yeah, the shepherdess. Yep. Now, if the hunters hadn't come along, he might have killed her when she was screaming at him. But he doesn't. Right. But he does save her from drowning.
Yep. She's horrified and screaming, and he's trying to stop her from screaming, and then the hunters come along.
Right. But if he hadn't looked like he does, they wouldn't have.
Yeah.
Would she have screamed like that? So
right.
Yeah. So.
If it was Lord Byron that had pulled her out of the pool, she probably would have been screaming at him.
Right.
But
yeah. So it's interesting. But Karloff does a great job. Now, since we're on the monster, I guess we should talk about. I still think the look of the monster in the first movie is the best, but Jack Pierce does an amazing job with the makeup because this movie begins immediately after the first movie ends. Yep. And the monster shows that because he has the fire damage and the burns and the
he's kind of lost his hair and
right,
and he's got some noticeable burns. Karloff gained some weight in the interim. No surprise, he like we talked about, he went from a literally starving actor to being pretty successful. So, It's not like he, turned into William Conrad or something. He just he started looking a little bit more normal. He wasn't as gaunt. Because of his speaking role, he didn't take out his denture plate in this, so he didn't have quite that same kind of hollow look to his cheek,
right,
where that dental plate is. So,
yeah.
And throughout the movie with the makeup, they slowly have his appearance change a little bit. The hair starts coming back, the burns kind of disappear. It's kind of hard to notice so much because a lot of this movie is filmed in a really kind of dark atmosphere, and of course it's black and white and stuff too. But you can tell that the monster subtly changes in appearance over the course of the film.
It's interesting that they have I guess it depends what you look at Frankenstein as. Is he, is he brought back from the dead? Is he living, breathing, blood pumping? I guess. I guess so, because they keep the heart alive and all. So I guess it makes sense for his hair to grow and all that kind of thing. Right. Where if you think like a zombie, you think it wouldn't, but he's not really a zombie. He's he's something else.
Yeah, he's just kind of like a newly sewn together human or whatever. So.
Well, which one of the things makes The Bride so interesting, because we have The Bride is not just Frankenstein's technology, but it's also Dr. Pretorius's technology mixed.
Right.
And so maybe we should talk about Dr. Pretorius for a minute.
By all means.
So Dr. Pretorius in this movie really is he's really the devil to with Henry Frankenstein being Faust, right? Dr. Pretorius. Now this is another kind of other. He lost his teaching position for knowing too much, right?
Yep.
But they play him up more of an alchemist, like an old style alchemist, and he has the little hat.
Yeah, the skull. He has the skull cap. Yeah.
Yeah,
and he comes out with that like coffer. Where he pulls out his little miniatures,
So the term I see most used for those are the homunculuses, right?
Yeah.
Although the film never calls them that, but
no.
And that's the weirdest part of the movie to me. I think really is that, are those the little people he's grown, and as a kid, I guess it worked fine. As an adult, you're like, well, so they just sit there and the queen just sits on the throne.
Right.
And the king had a little chicken leg or turkey leg he was eating, right? So,
yeah. The bishop's nodding off, and it's
you even see a baby from the back. When you see the view from the back,
who was played by Billy Barty,
right? who our listeners have no clue who that is, but
well, there's. My demographic skews pretty old, so
maybe
they probably do know. So it is kind of I agree. It's probably the weirdest segment of the movie, and it fits and doesn't fit. I mean, it's cool that they have this black magic rather almost more than science. So Pretorius is almost dealing more in forbidden secrets and stuff, and following the alchemical black magic route, whereas Henry is more rooted in revealed science or something, or discovering new scientific method and stuff. And Pretorius sees the opportunity to fuse their two disciplines together and create something, even bigger. And of course, it has to be a woman, right?
Right. And he, although Pretorius definitely does not have good motives here, so Pretorius is, I do see him now. He's not a character from the book at all. He's something new to this film, and I have a hard time not seeing him as that devil figure. He comes, he tempts Henry. One of the reasons you see some of the analogies is, he tempts him away from his bride on the wedding night, or they say the wedding night. I don't know if that's the wedding night, but anyway, but shortly after they're married, at least, he's tempting away from his wife. He, the line you mentioned earlier where he says, it's, when you have gin, it's my only weakness. And then when he meets the monster, have a cigar. It's my only weakness, And that's something, Mephistopheles would say, right? That's something the devil's going to say,
Yep.
and throughout this whole thing, he's a tempter. You know,
Yeah.
and he has no problem using people. You know, he's using murderers who he's somehow hidden from the law, so they're not killed. And he's got them, and he's making them dig up bodies and do things, and we don't know exactly what, but it sure I don't know what they did when that. So again, folks, hopefully you've seen the movie when they're in the crypts, and the two murderers he has working for him are like, oh, do we have to do this? And they open the coffin. They're like, oh, well, she's a pretty little thing, isn't she? And then before they leave, now we just have a pile of bones. I mean, did they?
Right.
What did they end up doing? Did they, strip everything off these bones, or
I think you can kind of see when they open the casket that it does look like maybe it is bones in there.
Yeah.
But I think in a scene that was cut from the film, while the monster, so the monster's captured.
Right, which is a whole separate analogy we'll talk about here in a minute.
Yeah. But the monster's captured, escapes, and runs amok. And during the scenes where he's running amok, apparently there was a backstory for Carl, for Dwight Fry's character, where he took the opportunity to murder his aunt and uncle to rob them, and then use the monster as a scapegoat, blaming their deaths on the monster. So when there is a scene where they're in that house and they find a dead body, and then Una O'Connor goes up to the bedroom and there's another one up here. Right. Those are supposed to be the aunt and uncle for Fritz of Carl. But they cut I don't know if it was censors that clamped down on that and forced the cut, or it was cut for just edited for time or what, but that was supposed to be the backdrop to those murders. It was actually Carl that killed, and not just strangers, but killed his aunt and uncle for their money. And then because he saw the opportunity of, we can just blame it on the monster.
Yeah. And we see Carl kill later in the movie. They need a fresh heart. And and Carl goes out and kills somebody, but they hide that from Henry Frankenstein. They hide it for the fact that they've killed a young woman to get that heart. But that's interesting. I didn't know about that scene. That's interesting.
Yeah. So the monster, after he's rescues the shepherdess and is shot by the hunters, he's chased through what had been an idyllic kind of woodland scene before he encountered the shepherdess, and he, was eating some kind of root or something and drinking from the fresh spring. But now, as he's trying to escape the mob, he's running through a different set, and the forest is completely changed, and all you see is like the tree trunks. It's almost like telephone poles, a forest of telephone poles he's running through. And the mob catches up with him. The monster takes out a few by rolling a boulder off a cliff on them, but they make their overbearing or subdual rolls and bring him under their control. Maybe it's because he's taken a few bullets. He's been nearly drowned. He's been been burned. he's gone through a lot in the last evening. But they pull him down and lash him to a tree trunk or a pole and hoist him up into this wagon. And he's, almost like a crucifixion scene. So you start having this religious allusions and iconography going on too. And we'll see that throughout the movie as well.
Yeah. And I think that's part of what Whale would have called the camp in there, to be honest. Yeah. You kind of throwing this stuff in there. So yeah, your Christ-like analogies with the monster. Yeah, the crucifixion obviously has been brought back from the dead. Yep. And then at the end of the movie, you could read into the idea that he, dies to save humanity when he sends Henry and Elizabeth away.
Yep.
As he pulls the lever, which we'll talk. I guess we'll talk about at the end.
Yes, the lever.
Yeah. So
or lever. Sorry,
yeah,
lever.
the lever. Yes, lever. But yeah, you know, of course, every review of this movie makes fun of that lever, but
yeah,
you know,
it is pretty funny. So yeah. We do so we see this this kind of camp allusion to it's almost like whales having these like knowing winks as we're going through these movies and stuff, and or these scenes. I mean it's, you don't need to be a master of understanding symbolism and stuff to be able to see these things. It's pretty.
But he doesn't dwell
obvious,
on it.
But
yeah,
right, exactly. He doesn't dwell on it, and I don't think it's really meant to be anything more than just a knowing wink. But in a lot of cases,
yeah. And well, it's kind of like RoboCop, right? There's a lot of these kind of allusions to RoboCop. I mean, RoboCop at the end, he's even walking on water as he walks across the pond to get to get Red. I forget what his name is in that movie, but anyway, But again, it's not really RoboCop is more in your face than this movie is, but it's, you know, they just do. Whale throws these things in there, but again, I don't think it's not meant to overpower the movie, right?
Right.
By any means. But this, so he's captured, like you say, and he gets locked up. He easily breaks out of the prison. Out of the lower dungeons or whatever they call it, right?
Yep.
Or the old dungeon, I think is what the
he's all chained up and stuff. Apparently, he can't break the ropes on the pole, but he can pull the chains out and stuff.
Yeah.
So there must have been some pretty old, decrepit chains or something. But yeah, so he breaks loose, runs amok, and that's when we go to the Pretorius scenes, I believe. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we get, well, wait, when does he get, oh, that's right. Because he does the hermit between the shepherdess and getting captured. Right.
Really? Was it?
Yeah. Yeah. He runs from because he's shot in the arm by the hunters, and he runs. That's right, because he hears he hears the violin. He hears, and then he goes to the hermit.
Yep. And I'm sure if you haven't seen Bride of Frankenstein, you've probably seen Young Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Or its parody really well. But yeah, Karloff is the monster is taken by music. Maybe this is the first time the monster's heard music. And he's enchanted by it. You see Karloff kind of peeking in the window, like trying to figure out what's going on. And he's not really sure how to deal with it. And of course, virtually every human he's run across has treated him with scorn or fear or both. So the monster just like pushes the door in and gives kind of a loud growl. But instead, he's greeted by this amiable person looking for a friend.
Right.
And it's of course revealed that he's blind, and well, great. So you get to see that someone that can't see his horrible visage now is going to judge him on the content of his character rather than his appearance.
Right. And they get to be friends, and like you say, it could have turned out very poorly, but actually the scene plays very well.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it really does. And go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, so some of the other allusions, the other iconography, Christianity kind of things continue here, where where the hermit sees that he's, hungry and injured. So he gives him soup, he gives him bread. tells him to rest, and later on is giving him, or wait a minute, maybe it's Pretorius thinking, well, I think they both give him wine.
Yeah, they
and
both
bread.
give him. Yeah, they both give him bread and wine. Yeah.
Yeah. So like almost like a communion kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then he also gets a cigar from the hermit, and of course he's very leery of fire. He's been burned again in one of the others, like a little snippet scene, like between the hermit and
with the gypsies
and the shepherdess. Yeah. He comes across like a camp and wants food, and he goes in and tries to take like a turkey or chicken or something on a roasting spit and burns himself on that too. So he hasn't had a good experience with fire between Fritz burning him with the torch, going up in smoke in the mill, and now he burns himself in the fire trying to get this food off the spit. So he's really developed this fear of fire, and seeing his new friend, the hermit, puffing away on a cigar and lighting it on fire and stuff, he's naturally pretty leery of it, but learns that this fire's good. So, and in fact, so later on, when the monster seems to have this cave hideaway, he actually has a little fire going in there. I thought that was kind of interesting too. But
that so, and it makes you wonder: is that because they, Pretorius wanted him to have it there for Elizabeth, or earlier in his development, so we definitely see the monster develop. His speech gets better and more impressive, and his thinking, and
and he's just being exposed to more and more things, whether that's music or food and wine and cigars and actually having a friend. Right. So he has this hermit who's his friend, but then it's got to be spoiled by a couple yahoos that come in.
Right.
One of them, John Carradine, making an appearance. And in the commentary track I was watching last night, the person that was doing the commentary track said that in his very later years, John Carradine made an outlandish claim that he was offered the role of the monster before Karloff or something. So like between Lugosi and Karloff. And I find that very hard to believe.
I do too. Now Carradine would get to play Universal Monster.
Yes.
But a very inferior Dracula.
Yes.
But not until House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula does he get to do that.
He dons the cape.
Yeah. But dying pretty ignominiously in both of those, actually.
Yes.
So
they break into the hermit's cabin, and in a scuffle, some of the logs of the fireplace or something, if I'm remembering right, are kind of knocked about and start the cabin on fire. So here we go again. Everything that the monster loves can get burned down. And the hermit is whisked away by the hunters, and Karloff is left to fend for himself again. And that's when he runs into a graveyard, and he is all in a rage and tips over a big monument statue of a bishop, and that like reveals this tomb that he goes down into, and there he's content because he's among the dead who are his friends.
Right. He actually gets chased by the mob, captured, escapes, and then he gets to the graveyard. But
okay.
But yeah, let's get. Sorry, not to be.
No, that's fine. You're right.
Yeah. But yeah, he's happy down there, but then he's interrupted by Dr. Pretorius and his assistants,
his ghouls. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're they're grave robbing, and Pretorius, after they've opened up the grave for this, for the body, the building blocks for making the bride or whatever, the ghouls leave, and Pretorius says, "Oh, I kind of like it down here." So he's down there just yucking it up. He's got cigars and wine, and he's having his little meal, and the monster reveals himself, and they have a little conversation. It's it's a great scene where Pretorius is almost consoling the monster and all the difficulties he's faced and stuff, and then reveals, that we can make a woman, and the monster slowly makes the leap to wife for himself, and of course Pretorius gives this arch look when he says wife, like almost like Pretorius wants to be there on the wedding night to
right.
Get some kind of voyeuristic.
Yeah. Pretorius definitely would like nothing more than to have to help foster a race of monsters. But he from the very moment he sees the monster, he's using the monster. You can tell that he immediately sees the monster as a pawn in his game. Before the monster comes out of the shadows, Pretorius does something. It's a callback to the first movie. In the first movie, in the very beginning, when they dig up that first grave, Henry, of course, throws a shovel full of dirt in the Grim Reaper's face. And here, Pretorius, he takes his, sucks it from a cigar, and when he blows the smoke out, he blows it right into the skull that's sitting right there. This kind of callback to that, but Pretorius already has a plan here, and he's building his plan and sees the monster will be useful as a leverage against Henry.
Right.
Which he, very effectively does.
Yeah.
So
they basically, I don't know if it's a scheme that's hatched, but somehow they've come up with this plan, because there's a confrontation. But Pretorius goes to Henry's, who's now the Baron.
Right.
His father apparently just died from, I don't know, from shock or something, but which doesn't really follow. I mean, the whole ending of the first movie with that whole scene with apparently Henry and Elizabeth in the background, being, that's all kind of whitewashed by the beginning of this movie, because they bring Henry back to or maybe it's supposed to be something far future. I don't know.
Yeah, but that's retconned. Yeah.
Yeah, but the bride almost seems like it picks up right with the mill burning, right?
Right. I mean, you could see it as, I could see these events happening a few months after the original movie. But you still have to do a little bit of mental gymnastics to okay, so the beginning of this movie happens before the very last scene of the other movie, and then we go back to this movie, and so it doesn't really work. But but again, back then, so you're talking the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
You might have seen Frankenstein when it came out, and it very well was probably re-released in conjunction with this movie. That happens sometimes, but
it's been 4 years since you saw it.
Right. These aren't, you don't have Betamax back then to watch your movies, right? You don't have DVDs, you don't have streaming services. So, that they can get away with a lot more as far as continuity stuff between movies in these.
Right. So the Baron's gone. And so there's Thesiger, Pretorius comes and is trying to convince Frankenstein to help him in his scheme here. And now Elizabeth is protesting, saying no, he's much too tired. He doesn't have the strength to do this. we're going to take a trip, and so I'm going to go out and get everything ready, and when I come back, we're going to leave. Basically dismissing Pretorius. You are. I said good day, sir. You're done. And when she leaves, then Pretorius plays his ace card, because waiting in the wings outside is the monster.
Right.
And he comes in, and that's when he, confronts Frankenstein and does the whole sit down thing to Frankenstein. And they're basically dictating terms to him. No, you're going to make this bride for the monster. And go ahead.
I was going to say, of course, Henry refuses to even discuss it with the monster there.
Yep.
So Pretorius orders the monster to leave, but gives the monster the signal, the pre-planned signal, so the monster would snatch Elizabeth up and take her, as we talked about earlier, the cave, but take her hostage to blackmail Henry into helping.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't seem, Henry is obviously not happy about that, but it doesn't seem like they have to twist his arm a whole lot to get him back in the mad scientist game.
Yeah, well, he's got the intellectual curiosity. He was curious enough there on theoretically the wedding night, I guess, when Pretorius first shows up, to leave in the middle of the night to go look at his little creations, right?
Right.
So, he's definitely interested, but not. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I think they had to do that, though. I think without kidnapping Elizabeth, it'd be really hard to get Henry to buy into Henry agreeing to help, because you as the viewer realize that Pretorius has bad intentions here the whole time, right?
Yeah,
you can tell he's
Even though Pretorius comes across as comic and charming and stuff, you also know he is pretty much evil through and through.
Right. Yeah,
he makes no bones about it, really.
No,
he approaches it in a very coy way and stuff, but he's definitely a bad guy.
Yeah. Which I think was great to put that in the movie, because in the first movie, if you have a bad, I don't know, Victor, Henry's as much a bad guy as anybody in the first movie, but
yes,
the monster's able to stay sympathetic in this movie, to a large degree because of where they went with it. Thanks to Herman, thanks to some other scenes, but because all he wants is that friend. So,
yeah.
But
do you think I've heard a couple different things, and I'm not sure what's true, and maybe we won't know what's true. At least on the knowledge I have, I don't know. But there's conjecture that Whale made up the role of Pretorius specifically for this actor, for Thesiger. But I've also heard that they had wanted Claude Rains to do that part. And Rains didn't want any part of another horror movie at that time.
Interesting. I heard it was made up for Thesiger.
Yeah.
And Whale had, like I said, worked with him before, with this old dark house. I had not heard the thing with Claude Rains, but that's very possible. That's definitely very possible. I don't know.
It would have been a very different Dr. Pretorius with Claude Rains.
Right.
I almost picture him being more like what's the character's name in Casablanca? That Claude Rains plays.
Anyway.
The French.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name, the character's name. Anyway.
Yeah, I know who. Dang nabbit. Anyway, we'll get there here in a second. Because as Renault, Captain Louis Renault.
Yep.
Because the other character whose name I didn't remember, of course, from RoboCop was Clarence Boddicker is the bad guy that Kurtwood Smith plays. But anyway, I don't know. And I see, look on the internet now as we talk, I do see some sources claim Pretorius was supposed to be Bela Lugosi or Claude Rains, and then others say it was conceived specifically for Thesiger. So I don't know. I have a hard time seeing somebody doing a better job than Thesiger did. I think he was just about perfect for this part. Claude Rains is a great actor, but I think Thesiger was right for this role. I think it fits.
And I think Bela Lugosi would have been a horrible fit for that.
I can't. I mean, mind you, Bela Lugosi will come back to the Frankenstein films as Igor, as the proper Igor, who's a humpback shepherd who ends up being the assistant, and then spoilers, eventually becomes the monster.
Right.
And
a little brain transplant.
Right. But maybe we should cover those movies at some point. Just cover them together.
Sometime down the line.
Yeah. But now Pretorius is a really interesting character. But so they create the bride, and it's a combination of Henry's science with dead bodies and growing new things. So Pretorius grows the mind from from a seed, which, I mean, effectively you could look at today as like cells, like stem cells or something, right? But so Pretorius, because he effectively grows these from cultures, but he can't get any full size things out of them. He got to make these miniatures, but he was able to grow a full size brain. But the heart, they have to go kill somebody to get the heart. They have to get a real heart, and they need to use real skeleton. I guess they grew, but looking at the bride, it's weird because I mean, you kind of get the impression maybe they grew the skin and some of the organs for the bride, but she still has stitch marks.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Now they base the appearance of the bride from what I read off of Nefertiti, of the Egyptian Queen Nefertiti, which is interesting.
Because that whole like headdress that she has in that classic like statue, with it really swept back, and the hair of the Bride of Frankenstein definitely has that kind of profile.
Right. It's a very striking look. It's not a spoiler, but she's only in the movie for what, 5 minutes, if that. I mean, she's barely in the movie.
Yeah.
At the very,
and
very
for
end.
part of it, she's all wrapped up in bandages like a mummy, like an Egyptian mummy.
Right.
It's my understanding that Whale and Thesiger are the ones that actually did like the costume and makeup conception. I mean, Jack Pierce still did the makeup and stuff, but for the bride. But the ideas were a collaboration between Whale and Thesiger. And Whale contributed a lot too to the sets and stuff on these movies too, because that's kind of where he started in theater, was a set designer, and he was an artist and stuff too. So he was definitely a Renaissance kind of person. And
right. Now, as far as the acting, so again, Elsie Lancaster. I know I'm getting her name wrong. Yeah, Elsa Lancaster. She who played Mary Shelley in the beginning. She plays the bride, and she based the movements and the noise and the sounds from the bride on swans in London.
Yep.
And how they reacted
swans.
to people. Yeah.
Yep. That she and Charles Laughton would be feeding the swans, and they realized that they got too close to their young, they'd start hissing at them and stuff. And so that's
it's a really weird thing to base that.
It is, yeah.
This is kind of a really weird movie in a lot of ways.
It's definitely a trip into left field, into the surreal, and
right. It's almost, obviously this term doesn't apply to this movie, but it's, and I don't know how much you're into these kind of movies, but it's very Lynchian. If it came out today, it's like a David Lynch movie to some degree, right? Not as far as David Lynch, but there's definitely, like, you start off with the the flashback to the real world with Mary Shelley and all them, and then you go through and you got the little people in the jars. I mean, that's very Lynchian, and you got the there's just, I mean, obviously,
and I could see Dr. Pretorius wandering onto the set of Twin Peaks or something too. You know, it's
right. I don't know if Lynch is I haven't read a whole lot on. I've read some on Lynch and seen interviews. I don't know if he ever mentioned this movie, but I could see this being an influence on him.
Yeah,
without or at least a subconscious influence on him.
Sure.
But it's that kind of it's a really weird movie. And mind you, there were other movies at the time that did this kind of like Vampire or Vampire. I don't know. There's it's a black and white movie or obviously black and white, a silent movie. Vampire you can find on some of the streaming services. It's kind of like this. It's really surreal and has a dreamlike quality, much more so than this movie does. But again, this that German impressionist, and this is the European. A lot of these, Universal horrors are influenced by European filmmakers and European filmmaking ideas.
Yeah. A lot of the cast too were English rather than Americans and stuff too. So
and Wales English, So
yep. And so is Karloff and Elsie Lancaster and
and Thesiger and So you're seeing these, continental ideas coming across. And obviously, and they probably would have seen these other movies and these other influences.
Yeah.
But she rejects Frankenstein too, or the monster too, not Frankenstein, but she rejects the monster.
Yeah.
Again, probably because of his looks, right?
Yeah. Right.
He just can't win.
Because when they're taking off the bandages, I'm sure people at the time were on the edge of their seat. Is she going to be horrible? Or is she going to be beautiful? Or, and it turns out she's bizarre looking, but she's still basically Elsie Lancashire or whatever. And Lanchester.
Lancaster, Lanchester. Who was a striking, maybe a little bit of an unconventional beauty, but definitely a striking woman, a good looking woman.
Right.
I mean, definitely not ugly.
No.
And the bride isn't ugly, especially compared to Frankenstein. But it's strange that a newborn, especially because it's a new brain. It's not like somebody else's brain inputted in her skull. It's not a criminal brain or something. Yeah. So the fact she's repulsed by him is interesting because arguably she wouldn't have the,
she wouldn't have any value system on what's beautiful and what's ugly, really.
Unless she's repulsed because he's dead, right? Because he loves dead. Hates living, but but anyway, so the monster has enough of this, so he decides to blow up the place. He gets the self-destruct lever in the lab, and
don't touch that.
Yeah,
so there's apparently the secret lever, the not so secret lever, that's big obvious stick coming out of the wall, and they kind of tip him off that. You'll blow us up if you touch that or whatever. And, okay, well, now I'm going to. So the monster, as you said earlier, tells Franken by this. So Elizabeth has somehow gotten out of the cave and come to the watchtower to try and get Frankenstein to stop these crazy ideas and stuff. And she's at the door. There's like a little barred window at the top, and she's reaching her arm through, beckoning him, and the monster tells them, "You go, you live," and then he points directly at Thesiger, "You stay."
Right.
And what did he say? Did he say we belong dead?
I think something like that. Effectively that. Yeah.
Yeah. So he pulls the lever, and you see the side of the watchtower blow out, and then there's some secondary explosions, and then it just collapses. So apparently, the monster and the bride and Pretorius are all kaput.
Right. Yeah.
In one big finish.
Yeah. At least until a few years later, when they make Son of Frankenstein.
Yep.
And
because it can't kill the monster that easy.
No.
It is Karloff that plays the monster again in Son.
I was going to say we were mistaken. It is. Yep. Yeah. That's the last time Karloff plays the monster.
Yep. But
although Karloff will come back in a
Frankenstein movie. It didn't seem like he really had his heart in it in that movie to me. It didn't seem quite the same.
He didn't speak in that movie.
Yeah.
There were maybe a couple scenes, but for the most part, no. That's like I say, that's a movie for another time. But it's actually there's some campy stuff. It's definitely a B movie, but there are some strong elements to that movie. Actually, Lugosi obviously in one of his better acted roles, one of his better roles, more interesting roles at least, and it's much more of a German impressionist when you look at the sets and things like that. It's much more of its own kind of weird universe, Tim Burton universe kind of thing, right?
Right. I think, there's definitely the A-list Universal monster movies. And then there's a step down to the B-list, like Dracula's Daughter, and I think Son of Frankenstein is in that too, as opposed to Son of Dracula, which is, down in the D-list. But,
which along with the House movies, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula,
Ghost of Frankenstein,
Ghost of Frankenstein, Frankenstein. Well, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman's kind of like the second Wolfman movie, really. Really, that's because that kind of and actually, arguably, the House movies are also Wolfman movies, because if you take the Wolfman, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, and then House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, you get the entire story. Or the House movies might be reversed, but either way, you have the entire story of Larry Talbot to him getting cured at the end of the last one.
Yep.
So that's actually the Larry Talbot saga, which is kind of interesting. But that's like The Invisible Man. Like the first movie is actually a good movie of its own right. It's done by Whale, and it's a darker, like say, it's got of comedy and stuff in there, but it's a darker tone. It's definitely a psychotic, crazy killer in the lead role there. And of course, The Mummy is a great movie, but the sequels are definitely in that second tier. Second or third tier. But I think all the first run movies are definitely A-list movies.
Yes.
And I'd put The Creature of Black Lagoon in there too as an A-list movie, the original.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm biased. I have a really soft spot for the Creature from Black Lagoon. But I think all the original plus Bride of Frankenstein are constitute the A-list of the Universal monster movies.
Right.
And then there's a few that would fall into like the next echelon of B movies, and then for the most part, it's. There's some nuggets in most of them where there's something like, oh, that's pretty cool, or that's a good scene, or maybe someone has a pretty good performance or something. But there's they can be entertaining movies. They're just not things that you're like, whoa, I can't wait to watch Ghost of Frankenstein.
Right. Yeah. So. Definitely. So one thing we didn't mention that we should mention before we close out is unlike Frankenstein, there is a score to this movie.
Oh yeah.
And it's not constant through the whole thing, but there's pretty consistent score throughout the movie, and there are some definite themes. And in fact, when the movie opens, the opening part, I don't know what you call. I want to say opening theme, but I don't know if that's right. But the opening music is a combination of all the themes. You get the monsters theme, you get Pretorius's theme, you get the bride's theme, you get all there together, and it's actually I don't know about the bride's theme. It always feels a little too upbeat for me. But I think the themes are really well done. I think the score to this film is very well done.
Yeah, it is. It is very well done. I think for me, it works in this movie, but I really like not having a score in the original Frankenstein.
Right.
So as you allude to, many of the main characters, or most of the main characters, have their own little intro theme that will have slight variations and stuff depending on what they are. The monsters theme apparently was derived trying to emulate kind of the growl that he does. The bride's is a very kind of whimsical, well, not whimsical, but romantic flourish kind of thing. And Pretorius has this kind of just impish, whimsical kind of turn. It's
right.
They're all really well done, and are used, like, you know, in modern scores and stuff to introduce the characters. The introductions of some of these characters too, when they first bring Pretorius in, and he has a couple like entrance scenes. They're really well done, and the camera angles might be kind of weird. Like they usually shoot the monster from below to try and make him look massive and stuff. And Pretorius, it's almost like they shoot him from an angle that almost to try and make his head look more like oblong or something, because he has that shock of like curly hair on top that already makes he's got a very long skull, kind of like John Carradine, but then he's got this really curly mop top kind of thing that makes his head look even more kind of oblong and stuff, and the camera angle even, you know, makes him look kind of like this egghead, like this alien or something. But
right, yeah, you mentioned his entrances. Yeah, they are so well done. They're, of course, his first entrance, you know, in the rain and in the dark that first night, that's well done. But then the second time he comes to the Frankenstein's, you know, their castle or whatever, and you know, and their what's the maid's name?
Minnie.
Minnie announces that it's that Dr. Pretorius again, and Frankenstein says, "I don't want to see him," and she goes, "Oh, I'll send him away." And she goes back through the door, and he comes around the corner, down a staircase. Just, I didn't get a chance to congratulate you before, you know.
Yeah,
and he's a character. That's why I say I don't think you're supposed to read anything supernatural into him in this movie, but as far as like he's the devil or anything, I don't think that's the intent. But he's definitely, he's definitely
the tempter and the deceiver and the trickster,
right? And and just it's like the thing where he meets Frankenstein in the crypt, or the monster in the crypts, and no fear at all at any point.
Right.
At all.
Almost like he was expecting them to show up or something.
Yeah. Like he was just waiting for him to show up, which maybe was, you know.
Yeah.
That's,
So the big question, if you had to choose, which is the superior film, which do you, I mean, not necessarily judging on like some kind of critical merits, you know, like, because we're not film critics, or at least I don't consider myself one. But from a fan's point of view, which do you enjoy more?
So they're both good films, and that might vary day to day. I think as a pure Universal horror movie, I think I like the original better. But this is, I don't think there's a doubt, this is the superior movie when you talk about movie craft, when we work in the acting, when we work in the themes, we work in everything all together. This is a case where I think the sequel is superior to the original. I just think the original, with its simpler story and simpler themes, and without introducing as much camp, maybe fits a little bit better with all the original movies. But I do think this is probably the better movie of the two.
Yeah, I think technically, and just from a creative achievement, I think it's the superior work of art. But if I had to choose, I'm only going to be able to watch one movie this afternoon. I'll usually choose the original. I just find it more of a classic gothic horror movie than Bride. And I think for me, the big thing is the camp and the forced humor. Because I mean, a lot of the movies from the 30s and 40s, the humor is definitely over the top in a lot of ways. And what's her name? Uda O'Connor.
Yeah.
Is that it? I do find her character really irritating in this. So intrusive almost, and just kind of like jarring for me. So if her character was toned down to just be a more, straight character, I think I'd probably like the movie more. But that's really the only complaint I have about the movie.
So Bride definitely agreed. The camp and the kind of surreal aspects, lynching aspects of it, kind of pulled me out a little bit. But the thing this pulls off, though, it still has the I had the word a minute ago. It's late when we're recording this, folks. But it still has the pathos that the original has. The monster still has. You still feel just as much, if not more, than the original. Well, I maybe not more than the original, but both these movies, you feel for the monster, right? Mm-hmm. And both these movies, Karloff managed to come across as very sympathetic, mm-hmm. and maybe even more so in this one. I don't know. I don't know if I can say that. He does a great job in both, but both really pull that off. And I think maybe you feel a little bit more for Henry Frankenstein in this one than you did in the original. Mm-hmm. But
he's a little bit less villainous in this because he's being to some degree forced into Pretorius's schemes and stuff. But but all in all, another great movie. I did my top 25 movies a while back, and I think I had Bride in my second 25, but if I had to reassess, I'd probably move it up. But those things kind of vary from moment to moment depending on the mood you're in. It's hard to parse some of these things, but I had I think The Mummy and the original Frankenstein in my top 25 and from the Universal Monster movies. But Bride is an outstanding movie too, and if you haven't seen these things, by all means, I think you should. They've influenced so many movies since, and if nothing else, will give you a greater appreciation for young Frankenstein.
That's right. Yeah, but without a doubt, which like we talked about last time, is definitely a love letter to these movies. Just so our listeners know, we're not saying anything bad against Una O'Connor, voted by the Irish Times as 19th most favorite Irish actor. And I do want to not revisit, but in the earlier comments we talked about influences and reading in the movies, and I think one interesting thing about these movies, especially we revisit these movies that are almost a century old now, is it's really hard to know unless the director writes down what themes they're really trying to portray. It's hard to know what they're really trying to do, right?
Right.
And you might have some clues, you might not. You might think, oh well, Whale was definitely doing this, and this. But in the end, I don't know how much it really matters, because if somebody does view this movie and they watch it, they say, well, I see this as a strong feminist movie, and mm-hmm. when I watch this, that reinforces that for me, and because I have these beliefs, and it helps foster and if it helps I don't know what the word I'm looking for here, but you enjoy the movie for those reasons, and the movie speaks to you with those tones. It doesn't matter if Whale meant those tones being there or not. Maybe he did, but it doesn't decrease the fact that you are getting that from that movie. And that's the great thing about whether it's movies or whether it's art or whether it's, literature, you might get something out of that the author didn't intend, and that's okay. Or even if they did intend it, but regardless, so my big point is that we don't, whether I see the same thing in a movie that you do, doesn't mean what you're seeing is any less important to you, or those themes, or So I don't know. I kind of butchered the way I tried to say that, but
no, I get what you're saying. It's all take the good things from any work of art,
right?
And embrace what what speaks to you.
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
So,
yeah. So just because it doesn't, X thing doesn't speak to me doesn't mean it's not in there, or doesn't mean it doesn't speak to you.
right.
But that's what's wonderful about these movies. We can watch these movies from way back then, and they still speak to us, right?
Yeah.
And some of these themes still speak very strongly to us.
Yeah, very timeless themes. It's who doesn't feel like an outsider at some point in their life,
Right.
And the monster definitely embodies that, as well as many of the other characters in this film. And it's I guess that's why it's an enduring great piece of art, is it has these timeless qualities to it.
Right.
And as well as being just great entertainment and a good gothic macabre masterpiece of horror. So
very much so. Well, thank you. I know I've probably drug this out longer than you were hoping.
No, that's all right. I love talking about these movies. I'm sure I hope it comes through to whoever's listening how much we do enjoy these movies, and hope that other people, if they haven't seen them, that maybe this coaxes them into watching them. And I hope you enjoy them as much as we do. If you don't, that's okay too, but give it a shot. We think you'll like it. And I think you'll like the next monster movie that we go over too. So we'll see Karloff return in another movie in another role. But that will come later on in this spooky month. And until we talk again, don't go down in a heap.
I hope everybody's enjoying these re-releases. If you have any questions or comments, you can send them into the show. All the ways to do that are in the show notes. I'll reach out to Rob and get his input. You can also reach out to him. The link to his show is in the show notes. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to Rob for giving me permission to rebroadcast these. As always, thank you to TJ Drennan for the wonderful music and Ray Otis for the clip art of the Cerebrivore itself. And until next time, be excellent to each other.
A Nerds and Rebroadcast, Cerebrivore podcast. Let's savor all the flavors from the sign of Hemstraw. All stars and pods past, Cerebrivore podcast. You're counting down your last as you admire them all. Something's growing teeth, oh, so in your brain. Baby, all I need is this is shades of fake. And from all I understand, don't look now, the Cerebrivore is coming, and all that's left. Crying and the running, you can bring it, we can pile, we can bomb in any order. Just another brain of legal tossers running for the border. Just a snack, like a running, can I stutter? Beer and beer, Terry's melted butter. You can eat on a billion, and his customers never say it. Wasn't savoring the flavor of the movies it created.